Hi, I'm going to resume the story so far. I'll explain somehow the distribution of my home. 2 floors, the second one is only rooms. 3 floors. When you go upstairs and ending right is room C. The second door by the right is room B, and room A in the left. Okay, if you sleep in room A, you can see the stairs and the door of room C. One day my mom saw a man figure that looked at her, and then went downstairs. She couldn't say anything at the moment, but she thought that it was a boy, or that my sis or I sneaked in. She goes to our rooms. I was in room B, and my sis was in room C, but we were sleeping. Later one day I was alone in the home. We had a dog, and he started barking at room C. So I go in there and I see nothing. It was in daylight. Then by this time, because this thing does have a pattern, my brother moved to room C, which was empty since my sis moved out. He moved there with his wife and baby for a few months. One day they were chatting in the living room downstairs and listened to the monitor of the baby. Just sound, no image. That one that the toys turned on. The kind of toys that you move, and lights and sounds turn on. So they go upstairs and see that the baby's still sleeping, and the toy's not even near the baby. Also, I need to clarify that a lot of people, I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, have been living there for a few weeks or months with their partners and kids. It's not a big house, but we have a lot of space. Till this moment, I haven't really seen the thing. One day I was in the TV room. If you sit there, you can see the beginning of the stairs and part of the kitchen. The house is very open and with everything connected, with no doors, so the first floor is a big thing, with few separations. Okay, I was there watching TV, and then I see someone coming down the stairs and going into the kitchen. I wait to see the lights of the kitchen turned on, or see someone crossing the kitchen, but no one was there. This is the first time I saw it with my own eyes. At this time, I had a boyfriend coming over, and he was helping me cook something. I was in the TV room choosing something to watch, and he says, "I saw you." And I was like, not in the kitchen, so I go there, and I asked what he was talking about. So he explained to me that he saw someone walking behind him exactly in the path that I saw this thing walking. It's the same every time. End of the stairs, walk down, and then to the kitchen. Later, a cousin of my sister-in-law was visiting the city, so she came over and refused to sleep in the house, because she stated that there was something there. These stories took place from 2005 to 2015, but again in 2020 to 2021, when COVID was in the strongest phase. My dad got sick, and by this time at the house, only my parents, myself, and my daughter lived there. Since he was sick, attached to oxygen, my mom had him sleeping in the TV room. One night both of them saw the thing, this figure walking the same path I saw before. This ghost, spirit thing has never hurt us, but it does have a pattern. But it looks like a hat man, and it's kind of shadow-like. This is an actual experience I had, and it still freaks me out to this day. Growing up, I had multiple little paranormal experiences. I was always very skeptical, so the experiences I had I considered genuine. And I tried my best to explain away, and I couldn't. Many of them would happen even with company or family around to see it as well. So I knew I wasn't imagining it. As a teenager, I started getting a little too interested in the paranormal, and not being scared of anything. I got a little cocky at times, and at some point, I guess I started to dabble with something I shouldn't have. So it got a little bit too intense for me. I would talk about the things that happened or mention spirits or attempt to talk to the presence I couldn't see. And it would, as I like to call it, stir shit up. So when I was a teenager, I had this friend. He'd be in his mid-conversation with me and randomly trail off on some weird shit. That sounded creepy and didn't make any sense. Then come to and not have any clue what he was talking about. Like, "Whatever, man, I don't know what you're talking about." And continue on the normal conversation like nothing happened. Usually it ended at that. But when we were 15-ish, he went into one of his things, kind of like a trance or whatever, as we're on the phone. He said something like, "Follow the tracks to your right, and then to your right again near the end. You'll come to the resting place." I'll explain the layout of where I was living because it's important for the next parts. I live in a pretty nice trailer park. Ooh, spooky, I know. Off a main road in a small town. Heavily wooded nowhere near town. The main driveway came down the middle of the trailer park and dead-ended in the near rear. A little past to the dead end was an embankment, and at the bottom of the railroad track that was very rarely used. To the right, it dead-ended in some woods, and with one side being at the back of an abandoned old mill. The other side had a pretty dense set of woods behind a neighborhood, so I followed this weird cryptic direction after getting off the phone. It was late afternoon in the summer. I headed to the railroad tracks and headed right towards the end. At some point before the end, I hear footsteps in the woods to my right. Being curious, I headed up the embankment towards the noises, but there was nobody there. I did see a small graveyard curiously tucked away in the woods behind the neighborhood, like a small family plot, ranging from the early 1700s to the very early 1900s, only about 20-something markers. I was intrigued, and of course I brought my friend later, and he was weirded out, insisting he had no idea what it was, but he wasn't the lying type, so I believed him. It became a hangout spot of mine as I was dumb and brave. I would go there at night, all hours acting fearless. Nothing weird ever happening there, so moving on. Another day, another conversation, and Buddy randomly breaks into another trance. He says, "Head to the tracks, cross them, and when you enter the woods, you will see him." My cocky self immediately does just that. Late afternoon once again, this time I head to the tracks behind the trailer park. But I cross them, which goes through a bit of woods, comes into a clearing with an old mill. A different one because it's an old mill town. On the left and on the right is miles of cut-out power lines, cutting through the woods, supplying all the random neighborhoods scattering throughout the area. Straight ahead across the street for the mill is more dense wooded area. So following those directions again, I head towards the tree line. The moment I step foot onto the tree line, I hear branches snapping, and immediately just see a black shadow, or silhouette of a guy in all black, on the back of a horse galloping through the woods away from me, and towards the left, disappearing into the trees. I was a bit shocked as it was not common to see horses around my town at all. But being cocky and brave, I decided to head where he came from, which was to the right and the edge of the tree line, following the cutout of the power lines. Near the edge of the tree line, I found an old collapsed horse stable. Literally nothing else near it. There was another neighborhood about a mile in the direction of where he disappeared, but nothing else around the stable. So, being intrigued and a little freaked out, I go and call my buddy and I tell him. The following day, I bring him with me to show my findings, because he just refused to believe me, and I was getting suspicious of him playing stupid, possibly. But the most unbelievable part, as we entered the tree line where I saw the horseman that day before, we both saw him taking the small path as I did previously, broad daylight, clear as possible. There was no way we both imagined it. Both of us were a little freaked out, but we continued and I showed him the stable as well. The strangest part of it all was I brought a couple of other friends to see the stable, and each time he appeared to us. So after finding the stable and heading around the graveyard, things started to ramp up, with the little encounters becoming much more intense. TVs and stereos turning on by themselves, multiple times, even in the presence of company or family. Intense feelings of being watched and just inexplainable moments of dread and terror for no reason. Hearing people have loud conversations, or music like a radio was turned on near the room, while home alone and literally nobody in sight, outside surrounding my home. Stuff flying around across the room violently. Fresh handprints in the steam. My bathroom mirror after I showered. I'd hear the distant sound of my mom coming home, throwing the door open, tossing her keys on the table, and the cabinets and fridge slamming open while closed, while she made herself a drink. She was not a quiet or subtle woman, just to walk out of my room to talk to her to realize that nobody was there. Yet still one night, around 2 to 3 a.m., I got bored and decided to head down to the graveyard. I was feeling watched and just super uneasy, and I was trying to be stubborn and refuse to feel scared for whatever the hell reason. I was rebelling, I guess, telling myself I couldn't be harmed. So I get to the graveyard and all is normal and quiet. I hang out for a while and realize I'm being dumb and decide to head home and get some sleep. I headed back down the tracks towards home. I get to where I ended up at the embankment to enter the driveway to the trailer park. About halfway up the bank when I hear something rustle. I look up and see the horseman on his horse riding down at me. Pitch black, almost like a shadow in the dark. But I can see the outlines of everything, yet nothing reflected light. I hadn't heard of it at the time, but it was like how some describe shadow people. I remember staring at him for a few seconds in disbelief and shock. Then the horse makes this little pff noise with its lips, and I snapped out of it. I turned down the bank and ran along the tracks as I hear hoofbeats following up on me. I turn up in a shallow part into the woods next to the trailer park, weaving through the trees, trying to slow him down until I reached the street. And I ran to the trailer I lived in, which was at the front. I jumped in through the damn door and nearly busting the screen door as well. I heard the hoofs thudding behind me. My mom was at work, so I turned on every light, TV, and radio in the place to try to make it too loud and bright to keep whatever it was at bay, if that would help. I sat on the couch waiting for my mom to get home, and I eventually fell asleep. I woke up as she finally came home as daylight was coming in. I told her everything, and she told me I shouldn't be messing with this stuff. She believed me because she had always had experiences and told me about them regularly. Once the sun was finally up, I went to the embankment where I saw him, wondering if I had somehow imagined it all. Even curious if there was just a horse out in the area, for however reason unlikely, but just trying to find an explanation. I found hoof prints in the sand at the top of the embankment, and only at that spot. That was when I decided it was getting to be too much for me. But when out being religiously normal, I started praying to make it all stop and swearing I would stop messing with it. It all kind of died down until around when I turned 18, and suddenly it all just stopped, and I hadn't had a single experience since.
So I've been using Sleep Cycle for about 2 years. It will pick up noises during your sleep, snoring, coughing, talking, etc. It's never picked up anything out of the ordinary, a bit of snoring, some coughs. However, I discovered this recording that it picked up and it has creeped me out. For context, I live in a shared house. I have a lock on my door. There's no way anyone could have come into my room, nor does it sound like anyone I live with. My room was completely empty. In the recording, it sounds like a northern male voice saying, "Oh, don't worry," followed by a sniff, to which I reply, "Yeah, I've gone over everything in my head. Could it have been me?" The voice sounds much farther away from the device than I do when I reply, "Yeah." It sounds nothing like my attempt to put on a male voice. Is it a ghost? I'm officially scared to sleep in my house. I will be entering the clip here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had ghost encounters before, but never like this. Today I was at the ranch and at work the sun was going down. I had my pickup truck on playing music and the door opened. I was working on a pool my boss had bought. It was a little bit after sundown. I heard a loud metal bang first coming from my truck. Guess it's something in the song. Heard it again right behind me. Ignored it. Moments later, I felt as if someone has grabbed both my shoulders. Instantly triggered flight or fight response. My boss and his family live out of state. No one should be out there besides me. I spin around and got hit with, tunnel vision. Like when you look through a peephole on a door, but very dark all around. I froze for a couple of seconds. Couldn't think, hear, move, or yell. It went away, and I instantly just fell down. Not like being pushed or anything, just as my legs gave out. I don't know any of the history of the ranch, and I am never asked. I did in the past find a satanic star, or whatever it's called, star with a circle around it, found it in an old barn, maybe 300 yards from where I was. I just left it alone once I saw it, and I guess if there is an evil spirit out there, it probably doesn't help that we use the ranch as a retreat for pastors. I guess the star circle thing I found could have been Jewish, not satanic, right? Don't they look the same? Star David has 5 points and the satanic has 6 points. And yes, people do get confused about the way they look. I'm thinking it's there for a reason, to help contain or ward off spirits. So do not move it.